Hi, and welcome to PodRocket, a web development podcast brought to you by LogRocket. I'm Noel, and today I'm joined by Michael Hladky here to talk about his Perf Now talk, Big Data, Zero.js, Cross-Browser Virtual Scrolling. How's it going, Michael?
Hey, it's going pretty good. It's late afternoon here, and I'm motivated to talk a little bit about CSS performance.
It's morning here, but I am equally curious to learn about some CSS performance stuff. I feel like this is always like these kinds of rules and like the performance impact of certain attributes like this, and how they affect rendering and all that stuff is like one of those things that a lot of kind of full stack devs or even devs that are focused on the front end like think about a little bit every so often, but it's kind of like have your 2 or 3 things you check. But then, it's kind of like, whatever, I'm focusing on other stuff right now. So in this talk, there's a couple attributes which you really kind of focus on and advocate for. Can you kind of give us just a little bit of context, like why was this something that was of concern to you, and why did you choose to focus on these things?
In general, I'm really nerdy when it comes to performance, web performance, backend, anything like CI pipeline, so in that area, as you mentioned, you have your go-to approaches. Then you have like maybe libraries and frameworks that fix some stuff for you, like automatically handle the lazy loading of images and this and that. And then you have like, I would call it a new set of problems that arise when they changed the metrics. They introduced recently, I would say like last 1.5 years it happens, INP Interaction to Next Paint is a web vital metrics. And it's and that is basically measuring the interaction with your page. So you click on something and then a loading spinner pops up, and the duration from the clicking to showing that. So with this new measurement, we got way more bugs that don't show up when you bootstrap the application, but they happen while you interact with it, right, at runtime.
Yep.
And there are plenty of things that pop up, and one of them is layout paint problems. When you switch classes, the bigger the app, the more data, or let's say the more DOM elements you have on your website, the worse the impact is of those, let's say, small bottlenecks of adjusting the layout, applying some style, triggering the team, black, dark, and light team. So in that area, there is this subset of problems that comes with a lot of elements on the page. That's how I started to like discover solutions for those things. And as a I would say strong JavaScript programmer, every one of us tried visual scrolling at some point, like getting rid of the elements with JavaScript, reusing DOM elements, not having too much on the page. Right. And it's really exciting, but it also, when you really want to push it to the limit, you always try to understand, is there a better, more efficient way? And in recent times, and I would say like at the moment, it's especially interesting because it is supported in every browser. That is this containment and CSS content visibility that I spoke about in this talk, or spoke in this talk. And this is how I stumbled upon the problem, and I wanted to find a newer solution, a better, more fitting cross-browser solution to tackle that problem of a lot of elements and a lot of data.
Are there performance impacts where, like, is there a reason it's preferable to do this in the CSS layer versus doing it in JavaScript, or is it more just kind of like a semantics, ease of use, ease of maintainability thing?
It definitely has heavy impact. So if you manage to really fully replace your visual scrolling with CSS visibility, that is a heavy impact. It will perform most probably even better than the JavaScript solution, because there is less work to do. And then you can delete all of the JavaScript in like the entirely, so you don't even download it. It will have impact on your bootstrapping time, but also at runtime it will be better. And you maintain it with, like, I would say, very little code. Like, it's often, I would say, the biggest impact you can land with just like 5 to 10 lines of CSS, and that's it. You landed already, I would say, 80% of the impact.
Is this kind of virtual scrolling in JS, is that generally, are those operations generally expensive? Like I've done this kind of work before, and I've never felt that there was a huge performance impact on any of my projects, but are there times when it does become problematic, or is this like just kind of an optimization step overall?
Virtual scrolling is normally only used when you hit the bottleneck with too much data.
Right.
That is really like not caused by I would say the volume of JavaScript, JSON data that you fetch, but more like how you display it in the browser.
Rendering,
More complex the rendering gets, less of it you want to have present on your page, right? So if you have 500 tiles versus 10 tiles that you need to relay out, could be a big impact.
For people that have never kind of looked at the like container or contain property at all, just like let's kind of start there. Like what does this do? How is it instructing the browser to like optimize, or how can it be used to instruct the browser to optimize rendering?
I would say an underlying older rule that is the contain property, and then we have CSS visibility, content visibility.
Yeah,
and they build on top of each other. So I would start quickly with the basics of layout, and then go to that content visibility stuff, and compare it with JavaScript solutions.
Yeah, please.
So in general, the browser render pipeline needs to, before it can show anything, it needs to understand where it is. Where is my div? How big is my div? Is there a padding? Is it on the screen? And then when it figured out all the positioning of that element, it can paint, it can display that data, and you finally see the table or the grid or the tiles that you wanna display.
Right.
And the more complex these layout steps are, the longer it takes. What takes long? Bad nesting, bad rules, stuff where basically small changes in lower level fields can also bubble up in the whole hierarchy, and we cause a reiteration of that layout. And that sometimes can really cost a lot of time to do that. So what the browser people did, right, that work on the V8 engine, they said, like, okay, if we could statically tell the browser that this specific div will not change its dimensions after I change something inside of it, right? So even I can basically skip computing the layout if everything inside stays the same. I can even like compute the inside of it independent of the outside of it, because it will also not impact it. So I can decouple parts of the layouting work from the rest of the site, and that is contain. And then contain also have a property that is called contain paint, not only contain layout, and that does more or less the same to the paint work. You can isolate parts of your page and can like compute it independently. They will not affect or impact each other.
What is like the downside here? If one is going through and putting like contain layout or contain paint on like every element in the tree, like what's the kind of foot gun? How could this end up hurting you if used improperly?
Okay, then let's say like the UI impact, the negative. How can I mess it up? Or what's the downside, the price to pay? So with layout, you will change the set index, and it could happen that you like have overlapping areas, and then it's just in some cases nearly impossible to fix. And then you have to say, okay, in that specific part, I cannot use contain layout because I have, what's a good example? A drop-down menu, and therefore I always have to have overflow of the div and so on. And for paint, it's the same. If I would say contain paint on the menu item that has the drop-down, I would not see the overflowing drop-down element. It would just be coupled off, so it's like overflow hidden, for example.
Gotcha.
So it is, it's nothing that you should use everywhere, but if you use it on the right places, and that's not super hard to figure out, then it has very good impact with very little work.
I want to let you continue your kind of like, how did this work historically, and what's the new stuff that's been added?
So we talked about contain. contain the impact, the performance impact. So now we know it will reduce the time for layout and the time for paint. I also have measures, but the numbers are not super important at the moment when we talk about theory. Significant. And with this subset, you can now say, I can now first isolate elements. What I'm missing is, how can I treat those elements when they exit the viewport? For example, can I now, when I know a container will not impact its dimensions when its children change, I could theoretically just keep the empty container when I move it outside of my viewport, and the inside, all the DOM nodes and all the CSS that lives inside of that container, I could delete as long as it is off screen, and it will not have negative impacts. It will have positive impact, because then the browser needs to calculate even less.
Yeah. Gotcha.
And now we start to get a little bit closer to content visibility and to visual scrolling. Now we say, we are now able, before we were able with JavaScript to detect the dimensions and make that now and reduce the work a little bit. Now we are able to do that with the contain property, and with content visibility, we are able to work with certain concepts like am I in the viewport or not? Is one thing. And what are my dimensions? So you have a viewport observer and you have a size observer. That are also JavaScript elements, right? Native browser APIs, but they are triggered, set up and used via CSS. When you use content visibility, under the hood, you will use that lower level APIs. How does it work then? You put this CSS property on an element. You have to make sure that your layout is not breaking, because now you have these restrictions that you maybe cannot have like overflow or those areas.
Yeah.
If you only use content visibility, you sometimes can even not care about overflow, because it will still work. You figure out those areas, and you can, while the user is interacting, make the elements pop in, or let's say make the browser compute elements that are closer to the viewport and don't compute elements that are off viewport. And as we are able to do that with CSS only, we have a number of additional benefits to the JavaScript version of that solution, I would say. With JavaScript, we only would reduce the computation of DOM elements, right? Because we don't show that much. We maybe even reuse the DOM elements. We say we can reduce the interactions of changes with my HTML page.
Yeah.
But I will still have to deal with relayout, calculate styles, and paint problems, right? That is still. It's reduced, but it's still here because you still carry all the all the style rules for the content that is below in the CSS zone, right? In the browser, when it compiles everything, it's still there. It's still like respected by the algorithm.
Yeah.
And with content visibility, and this is the real game changer, you can even reduce recalculate styles, because now the volume of CSS rules and the volume of DOM nodes is completely skipped out, and not only the layout work that is like also impactable by the JavaScript solution. Now you have like from the very first chain in the browser render pipeline a reduction in recalculate styles, in layout, in paint, all levels.
What is the layer there that the developer needs to be instructing? Yeah. Maybe the better question is like, how can this break?
So when you try to make an optimization, you look for many elements, lists, items, stuff that is maybe always off screen.
Right.
The things have good impact, and then you will like try to look for the biggest area, and let's say that biggest area is our side menu, and the side menu has has no overflow. Then I can put it, I will not break it. Let's say our top menu has this drop-down functionality, and there we have overflow, or the layout would change, and then I cannot use it. Only speaking about contain. Speaking about content visibility, let's go one step deeper, where we also respect off-screen elements. Yep. You could introduce ugly flicker to your page, because not every element is the same size, right? Let's say you have a list of items, and the items carry text, and yep. there is more or less text. So when I would say, take this massively big list of text items, and when you like remove them, when you move them off the screen of the viewport, make them all 30 pixels high, right? Then many of them will stay the same height as before, but some of them will shrink, some of them will get bigger. So you cannot like put with simple pixel properties the exact size.
I see.
There is a property that is called intrinsic size auto, where it will measure from the first appearance its size, and then it gives that. But when you change the elements, it has a lot of edge cases. Let's say there are edge cases, and when you would just apply it, there is a chance that when you not check it if it's working well, that you, when you scroll, introduce jumping elements. Right? They will.
Yes. That's like the elements above are hidden, or gotcha.
And then they will push it down or up. And when it got released, the very early versions of it, there was a super easy, funny bug. If you if you had a setting that was exactly like that, when you push it off screen, it shrinks to, let's say, a volume where it would change the layout in a way that it pops in again, and when it pops in again, it gets bigger. And so you have an infinite flicker effect.
Yeah. Nice.
That was a nice thing back then when they released it. But nowadays, let's make it very positive, or something positive. Yeah. What is it is supported cross-browser. And I did my talk on Performance Now. Pretty amazing conference, by the way. I'm so proud I was able to speak there. Nice. Because it recently got supported by even Safari. At the beginning, it was just just certain browsers supported it, but now it's really also supported by Safari, the Internet Explorer 5 of the browsers nowadays, and they also decided to support it.
So you mentioned a little bit, kind of before I derailed you again, you were talking about this. Really just reducing the number of like layouts and paints that needed to be done overall. Is there, are there any interesting kind of metrics that are easy to speak about in regards to kind of performance improvement or good, even anecdotal cases you've seen when implementing this stuff?
I have even, I believe, a collection of data sets on my GitHub repository. It is massive. When we only look about desktop machines, we already speak from like 100 to 300 milliseconds in pretty much any case that we can reproduce with, let's say, medium big website. If you go on mobile, it's even more dramatic. Right? So. The example that I showed in my talk, there was the Next website, and they have a lot of modules, also community modules, self-supported, so a very, really, really big list of modules, and then they have this toggle where they can change the theming, the light and dark theme, and there, I believe, on my machine, that is a pretty strong Mac, I could reproduce, I believe, like 200 milliseconds.
Oh.
On click, right? And if you now go to a normal device, that would already freeze your screen for, let's say, 600 milliseconds. On my phone, for example, it's a full freeze.
I'm glad that there is this kind of, this option to use CSS to do this stuff natively. I don't feel like I've seen much discussion around most of this, like a ton on the internet. Why do you think this hasn't been kind of discussed, adopted more, talked about in general? Do you think it's just too new still, or is this not something developers are thinking about?
I can tell you why I personally believe it's the case. I believe it's really complicated to figure out how that works. When we stumbled over that property, this quite some years ago, it was very hard for us to understand how that could lend an impact. In the end, it is like super primitive approach, and I also documented in the GitHub repository. But that's, I believe, one reason. And building on top of it's very hard to discover and land an impact with it. If you're not able to make a nice demo and land a massive impact, why should you talk about it, right? Why should you put more effort in and write a blog post or make a talk? But yeah, it is actually extremely impactful. Like that's the reason why I really wanted to share more about it. It is like it's a one-liner, and you fix most of your INP problems that you have related to CSS. And everyone that is into performance knows INP is hard. It's not like a one-time thing. You bootstrap the app and you just need to fix here and there one piece. It is like really hard to tackle those problems, and it's not a silver bullet, but it tackles heavily purple and green in the flame charts.
Are the APIs themselves, like, of these properties, the way that these work, and you have to think about them as a developer? Do you think that like, is there room for improvement there? Can you conceptualize, like, have you ever been like, man, it'd sure be nice if we had another property, or if there was another mode where this just did blah, and that would make it easier? Or do you think that this is inherently the way it needs to work to get this performance boost?
I believe it is complicated explained in the specs. At least back then, when I was looking around, there were no really good demo of it. There was one nice talk from Jake Archibald that really showed how heavily impactful that thing is, but that was the only thing out there back then. Yeah, that's one thing.
Yeah.
That I believe it is considered as hard to figure it out now. I would reference on the talk and all the documentation that I did.
Yeah.
And another thing why I feel it took so much effort for us or for me to use that in our clients' projects, like solve real life problems with it. It was, if you look in the flame charts to really understand what's happening, you have a lot of information in the CPU sampling, right? You know exactly what JavaScript is executed, what function is called in terms of this function, and it bubbles up, right? You have like full detail. Right. When you look on the relayouting, like, it's tremendous. The volume of work and the different algorithms and steps is massive, what you need to do to calculate layout. But in your flame charts, you have one small box that says layout.
Yeah.
So how can you, right, understand more closely what it means with so little information?
Now, if you're going in and just trying to improve it, like, you're not going to focus on the thing that you don't have additional details on.
Exactly.
That's a black box. I don't know.
And even if it is like the worst thing in your interaction, right? Only purple is the problem. What should you do? And then it's very hard. Like, fixing those CSS problems was the hardest when we started to go full in on the performance topic. And now it is one of the things that I would say, like, we consider as low hanging fruits.
Yeah.
If that's it.
Yeah. Cool. Yeah. Do you think that the modern frameworks, do they have any role to play here? Do you think this is something that, like, the framework layer could take better advantage of?
Yes and no. I believe frameworks, libraries should use it more whenever they know it is always working. For example, putting funny experiment. I was like, okay, what could I test? How could I test the impact? I was like, let's take images, because they never have something overflowing normally. The image tag itself, right, barely has like before and after and blah. So let's just make a CSS rule, one line that gives every image contain paint and contain layout. And then the same, let's take every image and put content visibility on it. And that worked perfectly. Like that would be a default go-to case for frameworks, for example. If I have an optimized image library that handles also lazy loading and whatever, and I know I will put it on every single image, I will also introduce this CSS stuff. We wrote visual scrolling, JavaScript visual scrolling as a library for the Angular framework. And we also use it there. Like our first challenge was just make the visual scrolling implementation more performant than the one supported by the framework. And we nailed it with 16 times faster, but just a JavaScript layer. And then we also added the contain and content usability parts to it. And that also added slightly more better performance. So yeah, whenever you are fully sure what you will render with a JavaScript library, or that, let's say, the edge cases are really very limited, I would automatically apply it.
That's as good a segue as any. As just if you're coming at this just not as a library maintainer, but just as a developer like writing sites, is that when you usually reach for these tools? When you're like, my layout is fairly static once rendered, like there's not a lot of resizing on the content happening at runtime. Like when do you usually think is the right time to reach for this stuff? Are you proactive about it, or are you reactive?
I am very proactive. I would say like the most important thing is you have to understand how it works, right? And then it's the first thing you will do, because you can add 3 lines of code and you shave off so much of the time that it's uncomparably impactful to all the other time you can spend on other things, right? It's a low-hanging fruit for me, as I mentioned before. So I would go there first, no matter if you're a library developer or if you just build your normal static website. Even if you don't have a problem, as it is so little to think about, right? It's like nearly always maximum 10 lines. You just put it, and you can very quickly measure it. How I do it is I have a, what's that called? Bookmark. I have a bookmark. And when I click it, I zoom in the page for 0.0%. And when I click it again, I zoom out. That will relay out everything, right? So I click 3 times, measure it, look on the milliseconds of purple. It will only produce purple and green, no JavaScript. Very easy to look at. And then I quickly apply the JavaScript live in the page. I just edit the HTML of the page, and then I click the button 2 times again, and boom, if I see 100 to a couple of 500 milliseconds reduction, I keep it in. If I see 0 reduction, I of course don't put it in, but I always see at least 100 milliseconds going away.
Is that the workflow you'd recommend to developers? Like have something like that as just a check at some point every so often to see how effectively your site can kind of resize and render?
If you use modern frameworks, you think in components. So what I would suggest when you want to introduce those optimizations in your product, in your daily mindset and work, I would go to design system maintainers, right? The people that write these super reusable, everywhere used components. Then I would first fix that layer, and then I would go to all other components in my application that are maybe only used on 2 or 3 places, and then also understand how they are set up and if I can apply it there.
Yeah.
Page, normal website has a limited amount of components that would require or that would benefit from this optimization. So it is not too hard to make a list and then walk through the list and see where you can.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's any kind of common misconceptions or like a common misconception in particular that developers have around this the kind of the rendering, the layout layer that you think is it causes problems and would be something that devs could improve upon.
It even happened to me that I said hey, I have this really cool performance talk and I apply at a conference, and I'm like, yeah, but CSS, what do you want to fix with it, Right. I believe the most common misconception about optimizing layout and paint is you cannot really land a good impact, right? It's always when you think about like a performance engineer, you're like, okay, I have to get the maximum impact with the minimum of my time. And I cannot work around on something for a month and then ship it and it has no impact. Yeah. So, and as it is, or it was so hard to land an impact in layout and paint, or recalculate styles even, which is also purple. People like still carry, I believe, the mindset, I will not even look too much in that area, even if there is a problem, because I cannot land a good enough impact. And that, I would say, is nowadays, especially since it is cross-browser supported, disproven. Nowadays, I would say you have to look there, and not at some point, you have to look there first, because it is the quickest low-hanging fruit that you can get out of your time.
Cool. Nice. Well, is there anything else you want to leave listeners with, or implore people to check out, Michael, before I let you
go? No, if they want to read more, I believe we have a blog post on it. If not, all my talks on that topic are linked on our website. We can also add that to the research repository where I have all the measurements and theory for it.
Yeah, we'll get a link in the show notes for sure.
The more information that we can read about it, the better.
Perfect, cool. Well, thank you for coming on and let me pick your brain a little bit, Michael. It's been a pleasure.
It was also a pleasure for me. Thanks for your time.
Of course. Take it easy.